welcome to the Jazz Roundtable, brought to you by LiveAtZeroBPM, with your host, Grammy Award-winning percussionist and mallet player, Billy Holting. Tonight's guest, Ron Jones. If you care to donate, click on the donate/tip jar link in the description or on our website at liveatzerobpm.com/tipjar. You can also tip on Venmo at ZeroBPM. And now, let's get to the music with your host, Billy Holting.
Hey everybody, welcome to another Jazz Roundtable. This is number 4. This is really exciting, and I'm really excited because Ron Jones, who's on the show tonight, I'm a big fan. I'm also a friend of his. This is going to be a really great night. As you know, we normally have like 3 guests on, but I wanted to give Ron a lot of time because he is just so prolific, not only in his career, but in what he has to say about music. And I think everybody's going to really enjoy this. So let me start off by saying it mentions how to leave a tip. We're entirely tip-based, the whole organization. So please look into that. We also have merchandise on the website. You can tip. I'll put the links in the chat rooms, but they're also in the descriptions up there. And also, while you're here, and I'm going to mention this again later on, but please, like the video on YouTube or Facebook or thumbs up or whatever they call it, or Twitch. And then also, if you want to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Facebook, then you won't miss any of these things we do. The first and third and fifth Tuesdays are the Jazz Roundtable each month, and every Thursday night is live jazz, trios, quartets, and more. This summer, we're going to expand and do some things. But enough about this. Let's bring on Mr. Ron Jones.
Hey.
Hey, Ron, how are you tonight?
I'm fine. I've been looking forward to this. This is going to be fun.
Thank you. And I think you have won the grooviest shirt of the entire series so far. So another award to add to your
groovy shirts.
That's right. So for those out there who don't know Ron by name, you've all heard his music, and most noticeably lately we think of Family Guy and Star Trek: The Next Generation. But as an intro to Ron and I write back and forth, and he's been so helpful, and it's fun to correspond with during the pandemic because, as you all know, we're all locked down. We're all trying to find ways to stay sane and everything. And Ron was writing me, and I hope this doesn't embarrass you, Ron, but you wrote this and it was just so poetic. I just wanted to read it to everybody. So forgive me for looking down, but I don't have it memorized yet. He says, musicians often need to be always in a flock, group, or a gathering. I am strange in that I chose to find some place 1,252 miles north of LA away from the flock. I always say the greatest composition is not the notes we put on a page or the music we make, but it is who we are, the inner music we create and even listen to. Regardless of what town a person lives in, each person must create a reality, a purpose, a meaning. Out of that equation and through unique human filters comes an art of the soul. What I have created here is my lab. The forest, the longer I know them, teaches many lessons. Different lessons than from coping with the crush of millions of people all fighting to climb an anthill. There is all that inner dialogue and insight also. So much to talk about in a short space of time. And then he says, the world hungers for meaning. Music is a vital part of that. And it really is. And I think that sums up Ron Jones. So thank you, good night. And
No, it was fun.
Yeah, and Ron's right. And you probably we'll get into a lot of things tonight, but before we get into, your chronological history, what we talked about a lot over the past year is just how to find that creative process and stay sane during, which is very troubling times for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, I mean, you have to figure it out on your own. Like somebody next door that lives next door to me down the road has to figure out that they like knitting or they like something. You have to have something you're excited to wake up and do, and you're excited to wake up the next day and do it again. And if you're not, then you really have compounded the problems.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I hope, most people that are listening to the show, I think are musicians or have some musician background. So they probably get that on a different level, but it could be, you love running or you knitting, or it could be anything. There's no limits to it. I'm hoping that most people have found a way to tap into that while they were gone. But let's go back and through a couple of go chronologically kind of thing. Well, first, you're an award-winning composer, and I see that the 2017 ASCAP Screen Music Award for Best Top Cable Television Series for The Family Guy. You have several Grammy and 5 Emmy nominations, which is awesome. You won a Narrowed Award in 1991, Best Soundtrack Album of the Year. And also the Academy gave you it's a very long title, but they gave you an award for 1998-99 for Star Trek: The Next Generation. Do you have any new awards we don't know about yet?
Well, there's a bunch for a film that I scored, and actually my sister was the creator of this film, and she lives in Rome, and she did a film because she loves Naples, about the kind of a history of Naples through the eyes of a young boy. And there's like a legend about a treasure. So she said, I'm doing this film. And I said, I wrote this guitar concerto, and I think you should listen to that. You can use it if you like, since, we're brother and sister. And she tracked it and ended up filming the whole film to the second movement of the guitar concerto. And then it just won. She won like 70 awards around the planet, and we won best score in 3 of I think it was St. Petersburg, something in Hollywood, and something in the south of, like in Cambria, in Italy. So there's always something. They send me these goofy awards.
Well, that's cool. So, like I said, I want to kind of go through your resume chronologically, or through your life chronologically. But one of the questions I had is, when Ron Jones was very young and you wanted to get into composing, what was the first sort of thing you wrote, and who influenced you back then?
I was in drum and bugle corps, which sounds dumb until you go see a drum and bugle corps. You go see like the Blue Devils or Santa Clara Vanguard or something. It's like they're doing the Rite of Spring, and they're all marching backwards in 7/8, and there's like 30 percussion and giant horn lines, and you practice. So I came out of that kind of hardcore thing, and band was always too easy. It was like nobody took band, like nobody was as serious, because we worked really, really hard in drum corps. So when I would hear the horn lines warm up in the parades, and they'd be downtown Seattle, the Seafair Parade and stuff, I would wander around and I listened to the horn sections warm up. And I remember hearing the Seattle Shamrocks do just a warm up. It was just like a B flat chord, E flat chord, like huge chords. I said, I want to do that. And so I started doing takedowns of records and doing everything I can to learn how to do it. Then we finally, my family decided to move us to Oregon, my brother and I started a drum corps, which is still going after 50 some years, called the Oregon Crusaders. And so I had to do the drill, write the drum parts, recruit the kids, tell the parents where we were taking their kids to on a bus, where their daughters were going to be. We had to do all that. And we were kids. I barely had my driver's license.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I started. I started in drum corps, and it's much like ballet, because every moment is scored. It's not like a marching band show and sloppy. It's tight, like the Bolshoi ballet with music. So really, I that was easy to go into film scoring, because film scoring was so similar to what we had to do with creating these shows that were played in stadiums.
Right.
I know it's weird.
A bunch of guys I went to college with came out of drum corps, and so they got me into watching a lot of it, and it's actually pretty darn impressive. You wouldn't think, but it's more than a glorified marching band, and it's very cool. So let's see. So you moved to LA to go to the Dick Grove School of Music. Mm-hmm. How did you like that?
Yeah. Well, when I was getting ready to graduate, I knew I got in college, I just wanted to get my degree, just to prove that somebody in my family could get a college degree. I didn't really care about doing anything with it. I just wanted to do it to prove I wasn't stupid or something. And so once I got it, I kept looking at Eastman School for graduate
Hmm.
stuff or Juilliard and different places. And really, what I wanted was what Dick Rope was doing, which was about writing for records, writing for film, writing for TV, all that kind of Hollywood stuff was more my, and I started a publishing company in college. They let us like get a loan at the bank across the street from the university. So I went over there and they said, you would like a loan? I said, yeah. What do you need it for? I said, well, you want to start a publishing company. Whereas most students would get it to buy supplies or pay tuition or
Yeah.
whatever. I started a publishing company. And then I would sell the charts or what I copy by hand, make copies at the school printing place, and go sell them at the Jazz Educators Conference out of the trunk of my car. So I thought when I got back from a year at Dick Rose, I would come back to Seattle or Portland and just continue being a music publisher. But I ended up getting snagged into television.
And you started some of this while you were still at Dick Grove, right?
Yeah. Oh
And
yeah.
this
Yeah.
was
I was. Yeah.
animated series?
Yeah. Well, see, to survive, Laurie worked at a Pizza Hut, my wife, and I, to carry my end, I copied music. So I copied for Zan Overall, who had people like Al Jarreau, Carole King, Hanna Barbera, different accounts would come over there. In fact, Al Jarreau lived next door, and all these different people were right on the same block in North Hollywood. So I started copying just to make some bread while I was going to Dick Grove, and a lot of the accounts, as I was copying, I said I can do this. So that's how I would go to I would say instead of paying a guy $40 on a motorcycle to drop the music off for the record date or the
Uh-huh.
score, and I take it. So I just wanted to go in and see what was happening, and so I started going to Hanna-Barbera and I said, I could write this. And I circle all of the scores with red marks
Hmm.
so that the composer Hoyt Curtin, the music director, kept going, what's all these red circles? He was going, what's with the red circles? Because I was critiquing the arrangers that they wrote the alto flutes too low, and I would write comments, all kinds of critiques. And finally, I had the nerve to go up to Hoyt during a break and say, Hoyt, those red marks? That's me. So after being slapped around in the hallway, I said, really like to do this. I could do this. So, that's how I kind of got in.
Now, back then, how did you deal with the timing for cartoons and timing in music? Was it all just click track, or how did you do that?
Well, the way that they did it was very primitive because at that time, like they would be animating the shows in Australia and Korea and Japan and Czechoslovakia, and Hollywood would just be sending out the storyboards. So all these, for budgets and everything, all these things are being done. So the composers, in order to get this mountain of music for, because Hanna-Barbera had shows on ABC, NBC, and CBS on Saturday morning. They just owned the airways. You had to create a lot of music. So the composers were handed a storyboard, which was like, it looks like a cartoon, like if you bought a comic book, and then it would have footage when Johnny Quest would walk, they would say 6x, 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 which meant 6 frames per walk. And then there would be dialogue, and Brace Banyan or whoever the character would say, Johnny, we've got to go find the professor. And you had no timings for that. So they didn't tell you anything. They just sent you home with that. So you had to figure out that one thing was footage, film footage, like, 24 frames per second. And then some were real time. So I had to use a stopwatch for the dialogue and math for the timings.
Okay, so you used the stopwatch. I mean, did you have a dialogue track? And you would just time when
Yeah.
they said things?
Yeah, they
Oh,
would hand you a cassette called a slug,
mhm.
because what they would do is they would pre-record all of dialogue and stick it in there. That's how they could get the voice to match up. I mean, it was like they really needed to do a book about how animation was done in the 70s and 80s, because it was nutty.
It's like the dark ages.
It was, but it prepared me for working for Roger Corman, doing B films and all kinds of things.
Well, just so you know, we have a lot of people in the chat room, and Larry is here, and she says
Nice.
footage 3 feet equals 2 seconds. And so
I almost shot the coffee at my nose. Yeah.
And we have a couple of other regulars here. Chris is here, our friend from Hawaii. He says, wow, that was an amazing
Oh,
insight.
nice.
Brad Dutz is here. Of course, Brad, you know very well.
Oh, nice.
And then
Nice.
Bill Gibson Music is here in that. And over
Oh, yeah,
in,
Bill. Yeah, Bill mixes all my symphony stuff.
oh, hey, Bill. Welcome. And then
He's in
over on
Phoenix.
in Facebook land, we have Toby Simmons and Neil just showed up, and Anna is here. And of course, Phil, our friend from Ontario, who has not missed a single show. So I always like to
Nice.
say
I
shout
remember
outs.
seeing his texting on one of those. He was doing questions.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, he's a
Both from
talker.
Ontario. Yeah.
Yeah, and then also I want to just say thank God for Chris and Larry for the tips. That was very great of you. And anyway, let's get back into this. Let me get to my notes again. So Dick Grove, and then you started working with Mike Post and Pete Carpenter. And I remember back in the day hearing that they had 13 primetime shows running all at the same time. So that must have been, that took a village to do all that, didn't it?
Yeah. Well, the thing is, like, you can't get into these. Like, everyone always goes, how did you get in? Well, I was copying music for Hanna-Barbera, then writing music for Hanna-Barbera. And then the players like Vince DeRosa and Tommy Peterson and Tommy Johnson, all these different players said, man, you're really writing great stuff. And then they would go to Mike Post sessions and say, hey, Mike, there's this young guy that's writing his butt off. Do you want to hear anything from this Ron Jones guy? And they go, no. And they just kept mentioning it because they go, this kid really knows what he's doing. So that then somebody would say, a French horn player would say, hey, Mike wants you to call on Thursday and give me a phone number. So it was always the players that championed me as a composer and arranger. It wasn't me. No, I never had to call and make that direct call to get a gig.
Wow.
It was the players said they recommended, because always a recommendation is stronger than, hey, if you call up somebody and say, I sure am great. And by the way, I'm really expensive and great.
Yeah.
And I'm very modest. So, and likable. A lot of people like me. So can I do your gig? It doesn't work.
Yeah, no, I get that from going to jam sessions. The cats that were actually out touring, I'll be all these people that would come up and it's just like, man, I don't know you. I'm sure you're nice, but my 40 best friends are drummers. So, but with recommendations from somebody, in fact, that's how I started playing with you, is because Emil recommended me, I think. And I
that's right. Yeah, Emil, you were his protege. And so when Emil couldn't make it, I said, well, who can I call, man? You're Emil. He says, well, call Billy. I said, Billy, I got your number, and I didn't need to hear you perform or anything. I just said, okay, if Emil says call Paul,
Yeah, it's who you know a lot of times in the business. And so, well, now with we did talk about this a little earlier when you're working with Mike Post and Pete Carpenter, how there would be a whole bunch of you working on an episode. And the process, like you said, sometimes they'd say, oh, do scenes 2 and 3, and somebody else is going to do number 1. So how did you keep it cohesive unless you guys were collaborating with each other on what was going to go on? Where did you get the themes, and how did they work with you guys on that?
Well, we had the themes for the show. Like if it was the A team, you'd have that ba, 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 ba. So I'd have the lead sheet for that. And then when you come in to spot a show, which is where you get to see, where it started, and usually Mike or Pete spotted the shows, they would have the cue sheets typed up from the music editor and hand it out and say, here it is. And by the way, here's the lick. And usually Mike, when we worked with Mike, he would make up the theme right then. I mean, right as we were meeting, he'd say, hang on, I need to give you a lick. And then he would hand it to his secretary, who would make a few photocopies and pass it out to me and three other guys. And they'd say the session's on Thursday at 2:00 at Evergreen or whatever. And, you're on your own. So that's how we do it.
Wow, that's kind of cool. And just, Larry is, she's giving a little background history in the chat rooms here, which is
Oh
really
yeah,
nice.
no, follow her because she knows everything. I've slipped several notches.
We'll have
but
her on
she
the
is
show next time.
kidding.
Behind the scenes with Ron Jones.
Yeah,
But she did say,
the
okay, now,
wives, the real wives.
here's something you left out of your story about getting the gig. She says, I was working at Universal Music Department and got the phone number to Pete Carpenter. Ron called him out of the blue and got the gig. So
Yeah, no, that's true. She was involved in a lot of these things because she was working at these music departments. And so she would kind of get to know who's who, who's what, because you got to know who to talk to.
right.
And you got to have somebody in there. So, study the CIA if you want to get in.
Okay, so Mike Post and Pete Carpenter, then you moved on to working with Disney on a bunch of projects. What did you do there?
Yeah. Mainly a show called DuckTales. And Huey and Dewey and Louie and Uncle Scrooge go on these adventures. And basically the template was ducks doing Raiders of the Lost Ark. And they would just each episode would go to Africa or go to the North Pole and encounter something, and then they're late for school, that kind of thing. So and what was cute about it was the ducks were so serious about the adventure, but they don't have any pants on and they got, these feather things. So like so the cuteness was you're looking at ducks, but they're trying to be serious. Thus the humor.
Comedy gold.
And so I couldn't be funny. There's not one funny piece of music. I never got to write ha-ha music with the twa-twas and the trumpets and the wah-wah. I never, people think of animation as being this kind of crude language of crap, from the music. But Carl Stalling was very elegant, and he never did twa-twa. I don't think there's a twa-twa in any of his music. And I would put Carl Stalling right next to Schoenberg or Stravinsky in terms of musicality.
Well, it's interesting. In your bio, there's a story that says somebody asks you about your approach, and you say that you respect the intelligence of your audience. You're not writing down to them. You're writing for them. And I think that's probably a good example of how you handled the DuckTales and all that. And
That's how the funny story is how I got that. Is how I got DuckTales was Chris Montan, who was the music director of Disney, was just hanging out at Evergreen, and we were recording. He was sitting on the couch, and I'm sitting on the couch, and he just turned to me. I don't know why he said anything. He just goes, "Hey, that's pretty good." And I go, "Well, that's mine." And he goes, "Oh, you're doing stuff a little bit differently. It seems like you're writing serious music." And I said, "Yeah, because, when you were 9 years old, didn't you think you were serious? Didn't you build great tree forts? You did. You weren't just going, 'I'm a stupid kid,' You're smart." And I don't write music to patronize anybody. So a month goes by, and all of a sudden I get a call from my agent, and they said, "Hey, Disney wants you to show up for this. How did you get in with Disney?" I said, "I didn't know. I didn't even know who I was talking to."
Interesting.
So isn't that weird?
That's crazy. And then after Disney, you started working on Star Trek, Next Generation.
Yeah. What a weird segue from
Yeah.
doing freaking ducks to doing outer space with Picard and the space guys, I mean,
now-
what I shouldn't have got that gig.
You shouldn't have?
No.
Oh.
I shouldn't have got it not because I couldn't do it musically, but because if you look at the common knowledge that you go, well, if you've done A, B, C, therefore the D is the next
Yeah.
one. So mine was so far affiliate. It was going like XYZB. Like you never would imagine.
Now,
You know,
I was a fan of the show because I like all the Star
yeah,
Trek stuff, and I really like that show. And one thing that is about the time when TV series were becoming very serialized. Back when I was a kid, you could watch an episode, you could watch any episode, and it made sense. And Star Trek
yeah.
there was a little bit of running theme through the whole thing, but not these. The season wasn't one story all the time. So you had a different situation every week. And how was that? Did that make it more fun, or because you weren't just doing the same thing over and over again, or how did that feel with?
Well, there's different approaches to it. I mean, when you have a serial like Dallas, this TV series Dallas taught everybody in network television a big lesson about how to capture an audience, and then you had Who Shot JR to have a cliffhanger. So Star Trek Next Generation was basically a soap opera in space. So I called it Space Condo, was my name for it. And in Space Condo, like, what are we doing this week? And Dennis McCarthy treated it like it was a continuum, another day in space. For me, it was every show was a different show, different themes, different tonalities, different tone rows, different band. And so my approach was different. So to me, I go, what's the feature this week? And I would walk in and just be ready to do a completely different thing than last week. So if you listen to my music, it'll always surprise you. There's elements about, like, it cuts to the ship in space, and you'd have the bum ba 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 ba, as it's coming in. And I evolved that theme of Alexander Courage. By season 4, I wasn't using any bum ba ba. Everything was my theme, because the story of the characters evolved from season to season. And some of them died, like Tasha Yar died, like in the first part of the 3rd season. So you couldn't have a continuum. Are you the same person this week as last week? No. Different molecules, different everything. We lose skin, like, we're different. So my approach was different. And the funny thing is, they allowed that.
Oh, that's good.
And now I couldn't get away with it.
And then after Star Trek, you started doing Family Guy. And did you also do American Dad as well?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, the American Dad came out of the success of Family Guy. They said to Seth MacFarlane, they said, "Can you make another hit?" And he goes, "Yeah." So that's where that came from. And, it's just his genius that he could come up with that. But there was a gap between finishing Star Trek and then I did a bunch of other things. I did some video games, some features, some documentaries, different things. And then all of a sudden, there's always a gap of 3 years because when you do a series for many years, all of the producer friends you made leading up to that now think you're busy.
Oh.
So they've all hired other composers, other friends, and now you're the awkward character. Like, "Hey, how's it going, Jim?" And Ron, "Hey, yeah." Like, everything's awkward because now it's like having a new girlfriend, and you don't want to talk to the old girlfriend or the old guy. It's like bad dating. It's like, okay, so you have to start fresh. So it takes a few years to kind of come out of it.
It's not too dissimilar than what we used to call the dreaded road disease, where you couldn't tell anybody you were
Yeah.
touring. Because if they thought you were touring, they would never call you because they just assumed that you toured 365 days a year. So it was always a
That's
challenge.
right. So the contractors will never call you.
I do remember when the cell phones came out that were no roaming, no long distance. And I forward my number to my cell phone, and people would call, and I would just go, "Oh no, I can't make it Saturday night. I could be standing in Hawaii or Montana or wherever." And just say, "Yeah, no,
Exactly.
already got a gig that night," and that helped.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
Yeah. No, it's very true, because everybody wants you to be available now. You don't call a plumber and say, "Anytime, man, just let the toilets overflow, just whenever, dude.
Yeah,
You know, you want them now.
exactly. So,
Now.
but we're going to get to your recent projects, but I kind of want to get into some just musical questions to ask about process and that sort of stuff. And by the way,
Mhm.
a lot of comments in both rooms. People are loving the insights that you have. So my friend Susan from New York says she's loving the wonderful insights of Ron Jones, and Chris Stark, who is our friend from Hawaii, is he mentions like we're so spoiled doing modern film work with precise time code and digital audio and everything. And several people have commented just they're loving the insights. So thank you guys for listening out there. So,
Yeah,
but going
cool.
back to Ron Jones, now how do you work at such a high level? When you're with the incredible time constraints of like live TV or not live of TV shows and even film. Do you have a process for, getting the work done?
I studied quite a bit peak performance in athletes because I would find myself in these pressure things where I had to perform at a high level, and I would go to the emergency hospital so many times that they just had like I would say they go, "Hi, it's you. Okay, great. You go in IL-5, with the bass players,
Yeah.
and I would know where to go at St. Joe's because we would get dehydrated and start to hallucinate and we couldn't hold the steering wheel anymore and stuff because you've been staying up for 3 days, 3 nights. And I said, I got to figure a way to do this without dying.
Mm-hmm.
So when I study peak performance, if you want to go out for the Olympics in 4 years, you sit down with your coaches and they plan out your weight training and your distance training and your speed stuff. And to where finally, like you're not doing your event till you're getting really close. And then when you're doing really close, you're not doing weights, you're doing only the fast stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you get to the actual venue, you're just putting on earphones and imagining your best performance as a pole vaulter. So I got to know Jim Lear from
Mm.
Sports Science. He's like the top guy for all the tennis players and golfers, and I worked with him on a couple things and read all his books and I learned a lot about peak performance. And so what I do is I immediately jump into gear. Like I'm immediately when there's a show coming, I'm sort of like that athlete that's preparing for an event.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got it to where, for instance, you're always facing a blank page. How do you face a blank page? Like as a painter,
Yeah.
as a poet, as a writer, somebody creating a film. That's the hardest thing possible. So I'd know to create my material. I'd know to break down the script. I had a routine. I say, what is this show about? Even if it was the 200th episode of a series like Family Guy, I'd say, what's this show? And I'd say, well, it's a family that's dysfunctional. And I would like pretend like I didn't know the show, that I didn't know the characters.
Mm.
And then say, what's the main character? What are they all about? And then page 4 is like, if that character or that emotion was a theme, what would it be? If that character was a rhythm, what would it be? If that character was a harmony, what would it be? So meanwhile, I'm like Wagner. I'm creating this life motifs, and I have pages and pages and pages of themes sitting on my piano on the left side of my piano, always on the left side. And I'd have score paper to the right. I could sit on my chair and basically get anything I needed. So I go boom, boom, boom. So I tried to make the ergonomics and the whole flow of it work because otherwise, if you're not disciplined to know how to approach the art and craft, you're never going to get anything written. You're never going to get the job done, let alone excel at the music. I
Right.
mean, it's one thing just to say, "Oh, I finished it. I didn't die," and the producers are happy. But I'm not trying to please the producers. I'm trying to please me, an audience of one, and I have high standards. So I'm trying to write the best music that week that I've ever done in my life and see if I can top myself. So you have to be organized. Let me just put that in a nutshell. You have to be ready, and it's an event just like the pole vault or going out for the football teams, specialty teams, people that just kick the field goal and they always make a field goal. They pay them $5 million to just make it through those little things. Do you think that those guys that are the specialty kickers, they have 5 coaches.
Mm.
And when they have their off time, they go to clinics to check their eyes, to work on their feet. They do computer modeling.
Wow.
So why do people think that music just happens like a fart?
Yeah.
We just make shit up like Mozart. Mozart had a method. He had a great ear, and Charlie Parker, he practiced his ass off. Like everyone thinks that just happened. He practiced 10 hours a day in elevator shafts, So the whole notion that it just happens is wrong. And anybody that tells you that just happens, oh, I just feel it, is giving you a con job.
Well, let's talk about the Jazz Forest. This is your smaller jazz band project, because you had the Ron Jones Big Band here in LA, and now you're doing the Jazz Forest. And how would you describe the Jazz Forest?
Well, when we got up here to the Northwest and we have 22 acres, I didn't have a band. I didn't have anything. I was just trying to get plugged in and get my studio going. And I would go for walks with a dog that we adopted, who's a real hunter of squirrels and rabbits and everything. And we're out on the far trail. And I kept kind of imagining, what if the squirrels would come down and play saxophones and just improvise? Like I had this weird, fantasy. And so the first idea came from about the creatures in the forest coming together. That was the Jazz Forest. And it was a special place. And I tried to create this imaginary land where things would happen. And in that imaginary land, there was always a symphonic size string section, 7-piece rhythm section, and then a bunch of great soloists that also played ensemble. So with Influence Band, we had the 4 French horns and all that. So we had 24-piece band, huge, and we could barely fit into the jazz clubs, but it was sort of like playing charts and people drinking, scotch and trying not to fall off the stand. It was kind of fun, and we weren't trying to break any new ground, but try to give everybody a fun night for the band and for the audience. Whereas Jazz Forest, to me, it was sort of like symphonic expressions, like Gil Evans.
Well, let's play a little bit. I have some video. Well, this is a video. If you want to set this up, this is North by Freaking West, which is the title of your album. Let me just show the album here. There it is. And this is so old school. Ron didn't send me the graphic. I actually scanned this off of the album. So that's because we're old school here. I will have the links up for this. It's on Bandcamp, right?
Yeah. Well, this one isn't. This one's still on iTunes.
Okay.
But there's 3 other ones on Bandcamp.
I'll have the links to all of that in the show notes when you get to that. But this is set this up for us, because this is it's not a music video as such, but it's your title track. Or should I just play it and they'll just figure it out?
Well, when I was writing, first I'll set it up by saying, when I was writing it, Marie, who's in the other room in the house, said, "That's not jazz. Why are you?" She knew I was writing charts to build for this group I was going to start, and she said, "Boy, that doesn't sound." I said, "No, it's an homage to Bernard Herrmann, who did North by I keep wanting to say Freak, North by Northwest, Vertigo, Psycho, all these things which had these loops, and he would use little rhythmic cells. So this one it's in 6/8. So I used this Afro-Cuban lick that would just repeat and develop as it went. So it goes through all these phases, but it has this kind of late 1950s spies spy versus spy kind of feel. And so when we did the video, I told the filmmaker, I said, I want you to do an homage to Alfred Hitchcock.
Mm.
So we copied verbatim, like the main titles for North by Freaking West, by North by Northwest, and all that stuff. So that's what the joke is.
Okay, and so I'm gonna have the link to the full video. If you're listening to the podcast, go find it and watch it because it's very, very cool. So here, let me play North by Freaking West.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's just a taste. There's more to the video, and then you got to go find a link so you can see how it ends, right?
Yeah.
Hey,
It was fun, and that was Pete Chrislieb on the tenor, and we had Chuck Finley on that, and
yeah, I can pull
it's
up
kind of a fusion of LA guys and Northwest guys.
Yeah, I mean Chuck Finley, Jeff Koshua, Pete Chrislieb. Just there's
Brad
a ton of
Duke.
guys on here, and Brian Monroney. I used to be on tour with Brian Monroney. That was a million years ago. What a
Oh,
great
really?
guy.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
And he's a composer arranger himself. I
And
believe.
he's in West LA, and West Seattle, and he's
I-
busier. He has his own little studio.
I got to give him a call. Say hello. It's been a long time. So I want to give a couple of shout outs here. That we had a great comment over at Rich over on Facebook, but it's giving me trouble. I can't scroll up anymore. I lost it. So sorry. But Rich had a great comment about how we grew up with the real music and without auto-tune and all this stuff. And kids today don't know, everything. I think he made a comment about sports themes are just the highest, fastest, loudest songs in the world now. It's just
We didn't tune anything back then. There was no tuning at all. You just show up and play,
That's great. But we got a couple more tips. I want to say thank you to William and thank you to Teresa, my friend Teresa in Las Vegas. Thank you guys. And a lot of and now Larry had a comment. And she says that this is probably about Star Trek. He said, yes, it is. He would usually not get any sleep the last 3 days before the sessions for Star Trek Next Generation. He was writing for 70 Plus Musician. Takes a lot of time. He said, trust me. So, but you survived. So you did stay healthy.
And see
So-
what happened?
Exactly. So now
We survived.
the Jazz Forest, that's, you guys had all the cats. We said Chuck Finley, Pete Chrisley, just all the guys. And is that Dave Tull on drums on that one?
Dave played on a bunch of the tunes on jazz on North by Freaking West. That was Matt Jorgensen from Seattle.
Okay. And now I
who's
have a
one of
little,
the owner of Origin Records.
oh, okay. Well, I have a clip of the band live. This is the song, I Want to Take You Higher.
Yeah.
And this is from Seattle, a gig up there.
Yeah, we were in a place where Jimi Hendrix used to play in Seattle.
Wow. Okay. Let me play a little clip of this one. We have the Live at Zero BPM audience here even for the Jazz Roundtable shows. So
It's nice. It's a nice audience.
yeah, they're very polite and they're very good. So, but that was really cool. Let's see, and I have a bunch of clips, and I've got some clips and tracks from the album. But I was going to ask a question. You do so much classical composition, and you're working on an opera right now,
Yeah.
doing everything remote. Can you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, I mean, really, when the pandemic hit, we built a studio here that I could put 40 people in, and we haven't had one person other than my MIDI assistant who comes once a week, and he's wearing a mask. I'm wearing a mask. They say you can't get people in a room to do anything. I mean, it's difficult. So I had to start either give up or call people remotely. So I would call Fred Selden, or I would call, people in LA. There's a singer. Since I'm doing an opera, I needed singers. I tried to do it without singers. You can't do an opera without singers, So I called session singers because they understood recording and they had recording setups at home. But the opera singers don't have that. They don't think like that. So you can't get them. So I had to get people that were doing feature films to sing the opera parts. And that was a real challenge. But and then I did a whole bunch of symphony things. So I'm almost done with 2 albums in the last year that we've been cloistered here.
Now, when you're writing for jazz or you're writing for opera, how much of what you've learned from both influences across, or do you segregate them and just do that, or do you, how much experience? What's the word? How much cross influence is there with all that?
Well, with classical music, there's no requirements because people have stopped thinking that it's the main thing, right? So we're on the fringe. We're like polkas are more exciting and more have a bigger following. Polkas do than classical. So we get to kind of do what we want to do, and they went through the avant-garde and all that. Whereas jazz, there's much more adventure that was going on in the 60s and early 70s than there is now. Now it's sort of about getting airplay, and so everything sounds like R&B pretty much. It's an R&B bag with improvisation,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's these fringe ends of it, like people that are, let's call them like crazy out, with things, and there's people that are traditional. So they're all trying to sell their product, and trying to. So if you're in the 60s, the more out you were, the more product you sold.
Right.
Now, the more out you are, the less you sell. So jazz is dependent on those venues and audiences and selling albums and concert tickets. So they have to do a certain amount of sucking up. So I find that with the with doing it, say if I was a painter, after a while you get tired of painting the same boat and the sunset and the thing, like, so there's a formula to any bag. And so, with jazz, you state the melody
Mm-hmm.
with everybody, and then everyone gets to solo, and then you come back and there's a coda. I mean, it just got ill. I got ill from that.
It's sonata
I got
form.
really sick. Yeah, and certainly I can appreciate it. It's great. It's like I did a lot of things with Jazz Force, which were homage to uh, the greatest people, to Coltrane and to all kinds of people.
Mm-hmm.
But like here we did in my jazz band, we did like Sly and the Family Stone, and then we would do something from a very famous jazz piece that everyone would know, because I don't see the limits.
Right.
You know what I mean? And then the audience goes, well, why are you doing that? Why are you cranking that out? And I go, look, dude, jazz is supposed to be a 4-letter word. It was a cuss word that the aristocracy used to make fun of jazz. It's like saying horse poop, And so why do people they've elevated to some kind of academic level to where it's sort of like we're messing with the theory of relativity if you mess with jazz, because it's like everyone says, yes, we've solved the equation. It should always be these things. It should always be this long. I remember when I first started passing out the charts with Jazz Force,
Mm-hmm.
they would be reading their crazy, Seattle players, they'd be reading. And then we get to the solos and they get lost because they go, aren't we going to do the same changes that were at the beginning? I go, no. I had completely different changes for the solos. Now that's breaking the rules. In classical, they don't care. They just want it to be great and they want it to be interesting and they're snobby, but they want it to be. When jazz sort of they go, look, this is a church. You got to do it according to the verse and chapter of how it is, or you're not considered correct. So I broke every rule. We had 5 guys in the AV team for my band. We had 11 in the band, or 12 sometimes. You had 2 guitars. It's against the law to have 2 guitars in a jazz band. I mean, you could be arrested in 7 states for that. So, and one of them's Washington.
Yeah.
So I had 2 guitars, and like they're looking at the guitar players, looking at each other. Wow, you're playing something different than what I'm playing. Yeah, I wrote, I tried to write it. So I took Hollywood writing and applied it to that creative canvas. So, and we would sell out almost every venue we played at, but I think people were always bewildered as to what I was doing.
That's cool.
At least I hope so.
That means you're doing it
I
right.
hope so. I hope so. Yes, but it certainly doesn't help to support the band. Like if you're concerned about if you're not caring about making bread, that's the way to go.
Yeah. Now, you also started the Revel study group in LA, and I went to several of those, and you were talking about, well, you started out with a Revel score, but I also was there for part of Stravinsky, and then you got into Star Wars as well. And you would break it down into different things. And I had a question that maybe it's a personal question, but I think other people might understand it. It's like because you used to say, if you ever want to do this, cut out this 5 bassoon thing from The Rite of Spring, put that on your refrigerator. And if you ever need something that sounds like, So I was wondering if you just listen to a piece and find a bit that speaks to you in a certain way and say, okay, I've got to study what that was. Or if, and maybe both of these, while studying a score, you may find a nugget in there that you may not have noticed just listening to it and said, wait a minute, I can take this and then expand on it.
Yeah. The wonderful thing to say about the Broadway in New York is that everything happens like in about 10 blocks. And so all the playwrights go to everybody else's plays, whether they are doing that bag or not. And so everybody knows everything. So they're picking up and evolving. Car companies, they go out and buy all the other car companies, but Toyota buy all the Toyota models and tear them apart and say, I like the way they do the upholstery. So you're always trying to learn from the people that are doing it. So like right now, Larry always goes, how come you're spending so much bread on buying scores? And I'm studying Joseph Schwantner pieces, and I'm studying Prokofiev, and I'm studying everybody all the time. I have a stack of scores that I'm always having to get through because I'm still picking up lessons from these guys. There's still things to be learned from Bach. And that applies to jazz or classical or whatever you're doing.
Cool. So I'm going to play. Now, going back, because you're talking about the studio and have this big place, and hopefully as things open up, you'll be able to put 40 musicians in there at once. But I have the sizzle reel of Sky Muse. That's Sky Muse Ranch. Is that what you call it?
Yeah. Well, before you play it, imagine, in Close Encounters of the Third Kind, where Richard Dreyfuss kept seeing this plateau and he would make it out of mashed potatoes, or he would get chicken wire. And when I left Hollywood, I kept envisioning making 20th Century Fox. So when you see the video, you see that I did kind of like 20th Century Fox in the woods. If you only had $1 million.
Yeah.
I needed $1 billion, but I had $1 million. Okay, so this is what you do with $1 million if you wanted to create 20th Century Fox.
Okay, well, I'm just going to play a snippet. This is like an 8-minute video, but I'll have the link to the whole thing. But let's just watch a little bit of the Sky Muse.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead. Are we still rolling? 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. She loves me. Now all of you other guys are through. She says she's in love with me, not you. Well, what can you do?
Just go knock on some other door, because he loves me. Now nothing else matters in the least. My hunger for life has just increased, 'cause he's the beast. I get to be the beautiful.
Precious little baby in the manger, King of love, I want to do my part. You came to dry my tears, to take away my fears. I give you all the treasures of my heart.
Yeah. I just want to grab a couple of clips because you're doing so much cool stuff up there. And with that last bit, the way you look tonight, where was that filmed?
There's a senior center on Camano Island. It's an island out in the Puget Sound.
Wow.
And we would play there regularly, like 1 or 2 times a year. And they have a jazz series. Like here we are in this little town with like 5,000 people, but on Camano Island there's 35,000, and there's a jazz series.
Wow.
So I said, you know what, it'd be fun to bring my band there. And they go, what band? And they humored me, and so I bring in a big band, and Jazz Force would play there. We always had the place holds like 100 people. We'd have 200 people. We'd break the fire code. But there's just out on these little islands, out here.
That's great. And we're getting kind of towards the end of the day here, but I did have a question for you, and this is kind of open. This is not something we discussed before, but what advice would you have for people who maybe don't listen to jazz but want to get into it, or don't understand classical or just music in general? What would you say to someone like that if they wanted to understand more about what's going on?
The thing is, we humans sang before we made language. Our first language was singing, and we communicated so all that is stored in us. All those, like even the way we hear is an overtone series. There's a nerve that goes in the auditory part of the brain, and it has a fundamental, and then the octave, and then just like the overtone series, because we were built as a reflection to the music and the sounds around us, bird calls, everything. So I would just say, find the music that you enjoy, that you love, and listen to a lot of it, because music is about hope and possibility, and it's cathartic. You can either pay $100 an hour for a therapist, or you can listen to Coltrane, because it takes your soul on a journey, and you have to pick out meaning from it. You say, that bass part means something to me, and the way that you like it is cool. It doesn't you don't have to like it like somebody else. You don't have to like it like me, like the Maniacs. You just have to like it. Like if you just love albums of triangles, people playing triangles, dig it, or get a harmonica or something. But it's part of our brain, and it's the part of the brain that's attached to our emotions. These little ear holes go directly into the emotions. So if you want to alter your emotions and you're feeling sad, play happy music, and in 5 minutes, you'll forget what you were angry about. And if you want to be sad and you were happy, then we can do that too. It's like, I always think of myself as the minister of propaganda, is that I know how to push all those buttons using major, minor, suspended clusters, orchestration. So use that on yourself, like compose what you're going to listen to. You say, I'm going to make Thursday a great day, and I'm going to listen to blah, 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 and, make an appointment with yourself to listen. I mean, you're always an audience of one, whether you're at Carnegie Hall or sitting at home in your studio or in your home. You're always an audience of one listening. So just jump in.
Well, I think we will end the show there on that note.
We just got started.
We just got started. Well, I'll have you back, Ron. We'll do a part 2.
I want to interview you next time.
Okay, and we're gonna have Larry on next time as well. So she actually.
Yeah.
Now I have to do a correction. She said that the "Trust Me" was about North by freaking West. So I think she said was talking about not being jazz and everything. So thank you. I stand corrected. A couple of the comments. Chris Stark, who's a guitar player, composer, friend of mine in Hawaii, he says, "What does every great practitioner have in common? A devotion to lifelong learning," which is just the embodiment of that. And Brad Dude says, "Thanks, Ron, for mixing the percussion so loud."
Of course. We couldn't put 9 tracks of you on there and ignore it.
That's great. And before we go away, I want to do the upcoming shows. Just give me a second here. Humor me. I'm going to just talk about what's going on. This is with the live shows this Thursday, 2 nights from now. Miley Landers Matthews. That's Jeff Miley, Tim Landers, and Herman Matthews. Then the Michael O'Neill trio is next Thursday, and that's with John Leftwich and Land Richards. Then we have another jazz roundtable, and this is my cross America. This is Pat Kelly from Los Angeles, Joe Robinson from Nashville, and Vinny Raniola from New York. That's going to be a lot of fun. They're all amazing jazz players. And then my band is playing my birthday show on the 6th. And then the weekend after that, Paul Perez Band, killer bands, bringing in Brandon Fields, Mitch Foreman, and Ernest Tibbs. Mm-hmm. Then another jazz roundtable with Don Peake and Don Randy, who were from the Wrecking Crew. There might be a third guest that night also. And then Dave Dirge is coming in with Larry Steen and Quinn Johnson as a trio. So that's all very exciting. And I'm going to play but I just want to say thank you, Ron. This has been great. You're fantastic. We could really just go on and on and on, but I try to keep the shows an hour.
Thank you, Billy.
And next time we'll do some more playing. We'll do some more talking. Maybe we'll have some other guests on as well. But Larry is like going, "No, don't end it." I'm sorry.
You could interview Larry.
Yeah, I definitely want to get the inside scoop from Larry. That would be great.
She's got the real story.
That'd be a great show. Just significant others, the people. So, and Keith over on Facebook just says, "Another great show. So glad he got his internet working again." Well, Keith, we're glad you could make it. I want to thank everybody that tipped. And, if you're watching this on an archive, you're listening to the podcast, the tip jar is up forever. So there's anytime you want to do that. But I will say thank you again once more to Ron Jones. All right. There's our polite
Thank you, Billy. Thank you, gang.
And I will see you all. I'll see everybody Thursday, but let me just play where's the outro here? And I'm going to say goodnight, everybody.
Thanks for joining us at LiveAtZeroBPM. These videos will be archived on YouTube and Facebook, so tell your friends. These Jazz Roundtable shows will also be released as a podcast, so please subscribe. Coming up on Thursday, April 22nd, it's Miley Landers Matthews featuring Jeff Miley, Tim Landers, and Herman Matthews. Showtime, 7 to 8 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. And as always, it's free, though donations are greatly appreciated. Go to liveatzerobpm.com for details and to sign up for our mailing list. Also, find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. See you soon.